Sound of footsteps in Berlin. I still remember that foggy May morning in Berlin, when the city, scarred by endless days of hellfire and sorrow, reluctantly exhaled its first hesitant breath of freedom. I, George Evans, an American intelligence officer hardened by the relentless demands of war, yet inexplicably drawn to the shattered soul of a once proud metropolis, stepped cautiously into the ruins of occupied Berlin. The cobblestones beneath my feet, scarred by explosions and bombings, seemed to murmur a litany of grief and memories as I made my way down the narrow, debris-strewn streets. Every step I took resonated with the echo of those who had long since vanished, leaving behind only the sound of my own footfalls as a somber metronome in the desolation. The city was a patchwork of crumbled facades and skeletal structures, where the remnants of once elegant buildings now lay in fractured piles of brick and twisted metal. I passed by a bombed-out synagogue whose shattered stained-glass windows caught the weak light of dawn, throwing shards of brilliant color onto the cold, unforgiving pavement. The haunting silence was occasionally broken by distant groans, a mix of grief, exhaustion, and disbelief that seemed to rise from the very heart of Berlin itself. In that dismal yet strangely tender atmosphere, I could almost hear the ghosts of its past urging me to remember the humanity that still lingered in the ruins. Wandering through the wreckage, I encountered the scattered figures of survivors. Their faces were etched with lines of suffering, resignation, and a flicker of defiant hope that defied the harshness of reality. It was not uncommon to see an elderly woman, her eyes clouded by memories of a time when Berlin was vibrant and alive, clutching a tattered shawl as if it were a talisman against the encroaching void. In one narrow alley, a group of young men, perhaps no older than soldiers I'd once known in uniform, huddled around a makeshift fire, sharing whispered stories and somber laughter that somehow managed to infuse the bleak surroundings with a transient warmth. Their quiet camaraderie reminded me of the old saying that time heals all wounds, yet also whispered a caution that healing would come at its own enigmatic pace. As I advanced further into the city, the subtle clamor of movement began to rise, a sound that mingled with the distant, rhythmic pounding of boots on rubble. It was then that I first encountered the unmistakable presence of Soviet soldiers, their silhouettes stark against the backdrop of a fractured skyline. They moved with a purpose that was both deliberate and unsettling, as if each measured step was an assertion of power in a place where authority had long since been suspended. The intensity in their eyes and the rigid discipline of their ranks stirred a complex cocktail of emotions within me, a mix of relief that the war was over, apprehension at the unknown motives of these men, and a poignant sense of inevitability that we were all now passengers on a journey into an uncertain future. In that moment, the silence of Berlin was pierced by the rhythmic sound of marching, a cadence that transcended language and nationality. It was as if the city itself was marking time, recording each heavy footstep like the ticking of a clock counting down the remnants of a fractured era. I felt the weight of history upon my shoulders as I watched these soldiers, their uniforms crisp and eyes steely, march through the deserted avenues with an almost ceremonial determination. The scene evoked memories of distant battles, of fields soaked in blood and tears, yet also carried an odd undercurrent of grace, a somber ballet where the roles of aggressor and victim had blurred into something unrecognizable. My own footsteps, measured and deliberate, merged with the ambient soundscape of Berlin, the city whispering secrets through broken windows and over crumbled masonry. Every step was a journey into the unknown, every crack in the pavement a silent testament to the lives lost and dreams shattered. In those early hours, as the sun struggled to pierce the persistent haze, I could not help but reflect on the paradox of our existence in a post-war world, where the echoes of death slowly yielded to a pervasive emptiness, and where every act of survival was both a defiance of despair and an acknowledgement of irrevocable loss. There was an inexplicable comfort in the uncertainty, an invitation to search for meaning amidst chaos. I found myself drawn to the subtle interplay between ruin and resilience, the way the remnants of a once majestic city now lent themselves to new stories, stories that were raw, unpolished, and infinitely human. In the muted light of that Berlin morning, every shattered doorway and every lingering shadow spoke of a past that refused to be forgotten, even as we all struggled to imagine what the future might hold. As I moved deeper into the labyrinth of streets and memories, an undercurrent of mysticism began to weave itself through the narrative of my own journey. There was an almost palpable sense that Berlin was not just a battleground of concrete and despair, but a repository of countless souls whose stories demanded to be heard. In the soft cadence of my own footsteps, I could almost discern the murmur of voices long silenced by the horrors of war. And with each step, I knew that the path ahead would unravel more than just the physical terrain. It would force me to confront the riddles of fate, the paradoxes of human existence, and the enigmatic interplay between death and the hollow space that followed in its wake. In that transient moment of reflection, amid the haunting ruins and the resolute march of strangers, I understood that this was only the beginning of an odyssey through a city where every echo, every footstep, and every fragment of crumbled stone held the promise of revelation. The questions were many, and the answers elusive, just as the rhythm of life in Berlin, post-war, remained suspended between the known and the unfathomable, a melody waiting to be fully heard in the quiet aftermath of conflict. The morning gave way to an overcast afternoon, its muted light lending an eerie softness to the ruins of Berlin. I found myself traversing winding streets that twisted between shattered buildings and silent memorials of the past, each step a quiet homage to those lost in the maelstrom of conflict. The steady echo of my own footfalls remained my only companion as I followed the mysterious allure of the city, a siren call drawing me deeper into its enigmatic heart. As I advanced, the presence of the Soviet soldiers lingered like a ghostly reminder of shifting powers. Their disciplined marches and inscrutable expressions gradually faded into the background, replaced by an ever-growing tapestry of human fragments. In a desolate square, I came across an old cafe whose windows were long shattered, its walls scarred by bullet marks and the relentless march of time. In that place, amidst the rubble, I discovered a small collection of personal mementos left behind by hurried occupants, a faded photograph of smiling children, a scuffed teacup, a diary with pages curled at the edges. Each relic whispered of lives interrupted, dreams deferred, and futures forever rewritten. The sight filled me with a bittersweet sense of empathy. It was as if the remnants of these lives were pleading for remembrance amidst the chaos. My journey led me to a narrow street where the ruins gave way to signs of tentative revival. Here, survivors had gathered in modest clusters, their gestures both cautious and hopeful. There was an old man with deep-set eyes and a gentle smile who moved slowly, his steps measured as if in quiet defiance of despair. His presence, and that of others like him, suggested that even in the aftermath of unimaginable devastation, there remained a stubborn pulse of resilience. Their shared glances and silent nods formed a delicate network of unspoken solidarity that resonated like the soft murmur of an old friend's voice on a cold night. It was in these fragile moments that Berlin's soul began to re-emerge, an unexpected phoenix rising amid the ruins. Yet the city was not without its darker undercurrents. As twilight approached, an unsettling chill crept into the air, carrying with it whispers of secrets too weighty to be casually forgotten. In a crumbling courtyard, I witnessed an exchange between two figures cloaked in shadow, one a weary local whose eyes betrayed an untold story of survival, and the other a stranger whose face was partly hidden by the brim of a hat. Their silent dialogue, punctuated by furtive glances and subtle gestures, hinted at hidden alliances and clandestine plans, as if the fate of Berlin depended on secrets locked away in that very moment. I lingered at the periphery, my heart pounding with the thrill of imminent revelation and the fear of what such truths might unleash. The delicate balance between hope and despair was further underscored by the ever-present sound of distant footsteps, a spectral rhythm that seemed to echo from every corner of the city. At one point, I followed that sound down an alley lined with graffiti and hastily scrawled messages. The inscription spoke of longing, redemption, and a yearning for justice that transcended the ravages of war. A particular phrase caught my eye, written in bold, sweeping letters, "Even in darkness, the light endures." It resonated deeply, like a mantra against the overwhelming shadow of loss, urging me to press forward even as the memories of the past threatened to weigh me down. As dusk settled, Berlin transformed into a labyrinth of shifting shadows and whispered memories. The interplay of light and dark, both in the physical remnants of the city and in the souls of its inhabitants, created a surreal stage where reality seemed to merge with the spectral. I found myself reflecting on the paradox of our existence, how a city once defined by rigid order and industrial might now reveal its raw vulnerability and inexplicable beauty. The surreal quiet of twilight offered no easy answers, only an invitation to explore the profound mysteries of human endurance and the inevitability of change. In a forgotten park on the edge of a bombed-out district, I encountered a cluster of children playing in the remnants of what might once have been a vibrant garden. Their laughter, tentative and pure, echoed like the gentle hum of a lullaby amid the ruins. They darted between toppled statues and cracked pathways, their innocence an act of rebellion against the somber heaviness that dominated the streets. Their joy, fleeting as it was, reminded me of the fragile nature of hope, a promise that even the deepest wounds could someday heal. I watched them for a long while, absorbing the transient magic of their play, and for a moment, the city seemed to breathe a little easier, its scars softened by the tender light of youth. The day's fading light ushered in a profound introspection that mingled with the palpable tension of the city. As I retraced my steps through deserted avenues, the sound of my own footsteps became both a solitary confession and a testament to the persistence of memory. Berlin, with all its ruins and secrets, had begun to reveal itself not as a relic of devastation, but as a living chronicle of resilience, hope, and the mysterious interplay of fate and free will. I sensed that each footfall carried the weight of countless untold stories, and that every crumbling wall hid the potential for rebirth, a narrative still in the process of unfolding. In those quiet hours of dusk, I knew that my journey was far from over. The city's whispers and shadows beckoned me onward, promising further revelations and unexpected twists. There was a magnetic pull in the very air, a blend of foreboding and possibility that compelled me to continue my exploration. And so, with a heart heavy with memories yet alight with cautious optimism, I set off into the encroaching night, the sound of my footsteps a steady companion on this uncharted path, ever mindful that the answers I sought might only be revealed in the darkest moments before dawn. Night deepened its hold over Berlin, transforming the city into a mosaic of half-light and lingering shadows. I continued my solitary journey through streets that had borne witness to both human triumph and unfathomable loss, each step resonating like a measured heartbeat in a city still coming to terms with its own fragmented identity. The chill of the evening air was both a physical presence and an echo of the spectral past, as though the very wind carried whispers of secrets too weighty for daylight. I moved cautiously, aware that every alley and every ruined doorway could reveal another piece of a puzzle that stretched far beyond the mere geography of a war-torn metropolis. The remains of an old tram line guided my path, its rusted rails a silent reminder of journeys once filled with hope and purpose. Alongside these metallic relics, the detritus of life lay scattered: a child's doll, a discarded scarf, a faded letter addressed to an unknown lover. Each item was a testament to lives interrupted, dreams deferred in the wake of relentless conflict. I could almost hear the soft cadence of voices once vibrant with love and laughter, now reduced to echoes in the cold, indifferent night. It was in these moments of unexpected beauty amid decay that I found a strange comfort, as if Berlin was offering a final, bittersweet benediction to those who had suffered so deeply. Venturing further, I reached a derelict building that had once served as community center, its walls now pockmarked by time and tragedy. The remnants of murals, vibrant in their former glory, still clung to the plaster in faded, ghostly hues. I paused to study them. Each stroke of paint, each deliberate line, told stories of resilience and defiance, a silent choir rising above the clamor of destruction. I remembered a saying from an old friend: "In the darkest times, even a dying ember can light the way," and it resonated within me as I absorbed the quiet testimony of art in a place that had seen too much pain. Inside the cavernous hall, the interplay of light and shadow became almost theatrical. Dust motes danced in the sparse beams of moonlight that broke through the fractured ceiling, while the soft sound of my footsteps mingled with the distant rumble of what might have been the city's final defiant sigh. I sensed that the building itself was alive with memories, a living archive of countless voices and silent sorrows, each one etched into the very fabric of the walls. In that space, time appeared to slow, and I found myself suspended between what was and what might yet be. As I left the building and stepped back into the open, I encountered a small group gathered in a narrow courtyard. Their faces, illuminated by the flickering light of a lone candle, reflected a mixture of weariness and cautious optimism. They exchanged glances and tentative smiles, their silent communion speaking of a collective will to rebuild amid ruins. Though no words were spoken, the atmosphere was charged with a palpable sense of shared purpose, as if every individual had become an unwitting keeper of Berlin's future, a future where the echoes of past footsteps would eventually give way to new rhythms of life. In that ephemeral moment, I realized that hope, fragile yet unyielding, had found its foothold even in the darkest corners. Yet, as with all things in Berlin, ambiguity lingered like a stubborn mist. Amid the quiet resolve of those gathered, I detected hints of unresolved tension, a dilemma of allegiance and identity that had not yet found its answer. My thoughts drifted back to the enigmatic figures I had encountered earlier, whose furtive exchanges in shadowed corners hinted at secrets too potent for the light of day. The interplay between the visible and the concealed, between revelation and mystery, was a recurrent theme in this city that wore its scars like medals of honor. And so, as I rejoined the winding path that led me deeper into the labyrinth of Berlin's night, I carried with me the sense that every step was a question, every footfall a tentative answer in a dialogue that spanned lifetimes. The night gradually yielded to a pre-dawn stillness, the cold quiet punctuated only by the gentle murmur of the city awakening from a troubled slumber. I found myself standing before a bridge that spanned a river, its waters dark and reflective, mirroring the endless expanse of the sky above. There, in the silent vigil of early hours, I contemplated the paradox of destruction and rebirth. The river, ceaseless in its flow, whispered of continuity amidst change, constant reminder that time, indifferent to human frailty, marches on. I recalled the somber words of a wartime poet, "Every end is but the start of something else," and in that quiet moment, those words took on a profound resonance. In the final moments before the break of dawn, as the first tentative rays of light began to dissolve the darkness, I paused to listen to the omnipresent cadence of footsteps echoing in the distance. They were not solely mine, but the collective heartbeat of a city in transition, a murmur of souls both lost and found. The ambiguity of what lay ahead, the unresolved dilemmas, the unspoken promises, the delicate balance between hope and despair, remained suspended in the air like a fragile promise of renewal. And as I took a deep, measured breath, I realized that the true story of Berlin was not merely one of ruin and recovery, but of endless questions that invited us to explore the depths of our own humanity. In that liminal space between night and day, amid the silent echoes and mysterious footsteps, I understood that my journey was far from a search for definitive answers. Instead, it was an invitation to listen, to the soft cadence of history, to the unspoken language of resilience, and to the timeless dialogue between past and future. And so, as the city slowly stirred from its uneasy slumber, I stepped forward, carrying with me the haunting, beautiful ambiguity of Berlin, where every footstep told a story and every echo was a promise yet to be fulfilled.